Welcome back, YouTube. I'm here today to bring you a breakdown of my new Ummagawd Remix V2 frame and the components I used to build it. Let's start off. First off, if you're not familiar with this frame, it is a reversed build, so your components all go underneath the frame as opposed to on top like traditional frames do. And the reason being is that it's meant to have a better center of gravity by distributing the weight equally below and on top of your prop line, and it works fantastic. So this is the first video that I've seen, and I'm making it for the sake of giving you information that it is possible to do this, and I'm talking about using a KISS setup on this frame. I'm using a KISS V2 flight controller, as you see right here on top, and that is powered by a Fettec 4-in-1 35 amp Sinewave or Sinewave 4-in-1 ESC underneath. This ESC is special because this Sinewave or Sinewave technology, I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly which way, what it does is the MOSFETs that power the motors are, instead of turning on and off at a very rapid pace, which control the power of the motors, they dim, which is the first of its kind in this hobby to do so. So apparently it makes for a much smoother flight experience and much better throttle response. So I'm looking forward to seeing the benefits of that, and I'll let you know in future videos what I think of that. Powering the ESC is powering the Stout V3 Ethics motors. These are 6S motors with a 1750 kV. I'm not sure what the magnets are on here, but they're extremely smooth motors. I don't know if they're N52 or N50 or 48s. I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that. Love these motors. I have them on my Alien build. They're designed by Mr. Steel and his Ethics brand. On top of these motors are the S5 Ethics props. Also freestyle props. Very smooth, low pitch. I like them. The video is Foxeer Predator V4 camera. It's a micro to full size camera. It's a micro size camera housing, and it's got the full size adapter mount, which is what you see I used here. I put the adapter mount on the camera and it fits perfectly inside this frame. Very nice camera. It's powered by the TBS Unify Nano 400 megahertz video transmitter VTX, and you cannot see that in this stack because it is actually mounted between these two top plates here, which sandwich our arms together. The clearance between these two plates is 5 millimeters, so the VTX with the shrink wrap on it is able to fit comfortably inside these two plates. And the only sacrifice you have to make, which is not a big deal, I don't even think it makes a difference personally, is instead of using a supplied pigtail which connects an SMA antenna, I had to switch that out and put a UFL antenna, and this particular one is the Foxeer Lollipop right hand circular polarized antenna, and it's more than sufficient for a 400 megahertz transmitter. The receiver we're using is the TBS Crossfire receiver with the stock antenna set up with the Immortal L setup, which Mr. Steel brought to light. This setup is great because it's compact. You don't have to deal with the mounting situations we have with the Immortal T antenna, and it's very practical for a frame like this, and I like it very much. I also use it on my Alien build. The top mount you see here is a Brain 3D GoPro Hero 7 mount. It is a TPU 3D printed mount. Brain 3D does excellent work, and anytime I have to print something that is out of my realm of printing capabilities, I always use Brain 3D. They have excellent customer service and they give great products and also a very wide selection. I am not affiliated with them in any way. I just think their company is fantastic and they deserve a shout out. So if you need a print, definitely look into them. And what else do we have here? Also, very important, and I had to work the build around this, is I use the Apex electronics kit, which, if you're not familiar with the Apex is the new frame from Immersion RC. Oh, excuse me, from Impulse RC, and their electronics kit is the Impulse RC regulator board, which is underneath the receiver that you see right here with the zip tie. The Impulse RC OSD board, which is what gives you your on-screen display, and that you cannot see. It is underneath this chin plate right behind the Foxeer Predator camera. And the reason being that you need these two components is because if you're not familiar with KISS flight controllers do not come with a built-in OSD like most traditional Betaflight controllers do. So if you want the benefit of an OSD, you either have to use an external board such as this one, or use a power distribution board that has a built-in OSD, such as the Mr. Steel OSD with built-in, Mr. Steel PDB with built-in OSD. There's a lot of abbreviations there. Or the Wolf PDB, which also has a built-in OSD. So I wanted to use this Fettec ESC because I wanted to see what this Sinewave hype was all about, and the Sinewave Fettec ESC does not have an OSD either, which left me OSD-less, which is why I went with this setup. Which actually brings me to the pros and cons of this build. The pros are overwhelming. There's a ton of pros about it. The center of gravity makes for a much better flight experience. Also, much easier tuning because the gyro doesn't have to work nearly as hard as with the traditional frame, fighting the build itself. And the quality of carbon is excellent. The tolerances for the pieces to fit together are all very tight. And it was a well thought out frame. And like I said, this is the version 2, so they addressed a couple of issues as far as structural integrity. They got rid of the spaces used for the screws that mounted the arms together and replaced it with beveled inserts, so flathead screws fit flush on the plates as opposed to the other version. They also did away with, there was notches originally on the version 1 frame where the arms slid into those notches, and also people were saying led to cracks in the fiber and hard crashes, so they changed that as well. The frame itself is very durable, it's very sturdy, and I only flew it this one day before making a video, but I could tell that I'm definitely going to make this a daily flyer. Right alongside my Alien, I will be bringing both of these out with me in the field every time I go to fly. The cons of this build is just one, and that is basically because of the build that I decided to do, and that is that you're limited to your space with placing your components. Because I need to use an external OSD, that led me to have to modify this build in a few ways. And the first thing I had to do was flip around this this ESC 4-in-1 ESC where it's rotated 180 degrees, so the pigtails are in the front of the quad as opposed to the back. And reason being that I need to make extra room for mounting components in the back. The way this frame is set up, you can do a 20 by 20 or 30 by 30 stack. However, you could only do one stack, not two stacks mounted next to each other, as you see on most frames nowadays, like the Marmot or Chameleon and other frames. So you are limited to one set of standoff screws for your components, and pretty much also limited to a 2-high stack as opposed to a 3-high stack if you were to use a run cam split or any other component that has another board you would want to add in. So with a little bit of, pre-gaming and actually taking apart and putting back together the frame and switching out components, I managed to get a fairly clean build. But that would be my only con with this build, is you would be limited to the components that you want to use. That brings us to the flight footage. So we'll start off with this first flight you see here. What I did was I computed in the PIDs that I have on my Alien build just to use it as a starting point, because they are the same motors and the same flight controller So I figured that would be a good place to start. But as you see here, there's a lot of oscillation right from the get-go, and that was a result of the quad was heavily over-tuned. So if you take a look at this example, this would be after landing and lowering my PIDs significantly by more than half. Actually, you can see that the flight characteristics are much better now, and the PIDs are far lower than that of the Alien. It was fairly cold out today, so the temperature was 30 degrees. Over here in New York City, the air was very dry. Considering it was so cold, it was tough to gauge how warm the motors were getting, considering the cold temperatures. But when I did come into land, the motors were extremely cool, and that suggests that the PIDs are good and the motors are not overworking, and I'm not in anywhere near a danger zone of cooking my motors. The props I used were totally trashed, which I tend to do when I tune a quad, because when you're working with perfect props, then you leave less room for error when it comes to flying with damaged props. So I tune with damaged props, and your flight characteristics will be that much better when you're dealing with better balanced props, and etc, etc. So that's a quick breakdown of this build, short and sweet video. If you guys are interested in this quad, this exact quad I will put up for sale. I'm gonna charge $750 for this quad, and that is $100 above the cost of my components. That's all I will charge for any build that I do. Whatever the cost of the components are, I tack $100 on top for my build time, and you will get a quality build. If you want to use other components than what you see here, then just give me a comment. Let me know what you're interested in doing. We'll be in touch with each other through Instagram or some other form of social media or email, and I will let you know if the components that you want work on this build, and I will be happy to build it for you. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you guys again, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good day, guys.